during this time to close a cycle in the United States. This is the last public lecture. The theme of today is Common Good, the Value of Group Life. Well, generally, we are very much submerged and conditioned by individual life. We function on a sort of survival seeking, and such a conditional point has come that it seems like our existence develops itself in function of this. This has also divested us from some broad human principles that have always existed in humanity, beginning with very ancient people. Human beings have always had the tendency of living in group, in tribes, organizing a principle of society. This is also a pillar of evolved civilizations that gradually discovered that only by working around common good, values and principles of these civilizations were really able to be consolidated and sustained by millions of years, hundreds of years. What makes sense within this theme? Why are we studying this? We are going through a very specific planetary moment, a very special planetary moment from a certain standpoint that is still conditioned by this whole social and human matter. And it seems to be important for those who still look for, I don't know if it's a solution, but some environment to be able to express themselves more profoundly, reflecting about this. Well, for those who do not know me yet, because we are transmitting live also on YouTube channel, my name is Freiluciano. I am one of the founders of Figueira community that since 1987 has tried to manifest this community group life based on a principle of common good, as we will see today. And this and other reflections can be found on my official webpage, that is freiluciano.org, and also on the Irdin webpage, irdin.org. Well, they are public lectures. It's a cycle. We are almost on the 20th public lecture, and the idea is to synthesize our experience in group life, and also for those who eventually look for some impulse to awaken and expand their own consciousness. Let us begin with 7 topics that could help us to have a certain parameter for us to see how our own consciousness is before this subject of a social life that is more collaborative, based on a principle of cooperation, because common good is something that we'll say later on, something more mature. It's something more mature when the social life matures some principles. Well, nowadays we are in a world, human life, that is very much based on immediate results. So everything that generates effort or that requires from us a certain continuity, we tend to give up or leave aside. And this superficiality of approach ends up impeding our being able to be sensitive to that which is behind appearances and that which is the need of others and situations. So, because we don't have a constancy and effort is the first impulse of this ruler, let us say. When this constancy is not present, it leads us to be superficial in our search, to be superficial in our approach, and with this we gradually give up on our initiatives when we don't find an immediate result. And we have to look with attention, because society as a whole, and old societies mainly, have only been able to deepen and consolidate their values when they would persist in a constancy in their effort, because they were following a very clear guideline that was addressed in generating a principle of community life based on cooperation and development of all, as we'll see today. The second parameter, let us say, is a possibility for us to contain that which within us denies the possibility of a community life. And this hides very much in that which we call a selfish life, which is when we believe that only our interests exist, our values, our principles, and everything that is broader, that is social, groupal, is dissolved. It doesn't exist for us, and we activate, without meaning to, principle of denial within ourselves. Everything that is not my personal goal, I deny, and I just state, perhaps without meaning to, an insensibility, indifference, and the result is there on the streets, in the families, in groups, different groups, professional groups, groups that develop some activity together with associations, for example, in broader scopes in nations, regions. So this indifference grows and it is consolidated within us when we do not contain ourselves, when we don't see an immediate benefit for ourselves. And you see, this is so rooted that even if we do these reflections today, here, now, our consciousnesses disconnect with this because they think that the subject it's not with us. So see how attentive we have to be to see how our consciousnesses place ourselves in this parameter, and then this reflection can be useful for something. Well, the third principle goes against the direction, a parameter goes on the opposite direction of the inertia that many have. So many think that community life, or even social life, as we can observe, is for others to work for us, or that someone may do something for us, and that we don't have to place there that is something so important, which is the development of our potential in function of community good, the common good, and society as a whole. Because society is something very broad, and it is still the addition of many community nuclei that we call society. We see that this is very much distorted, impoverished, not due to a lack of material situation or natural resources or whatever it may be of concrete. It is impoverished because we human beings are not giving the due attention to this, and therefore all of this that could be our contribution to generate a community and social life that is more constructive, based on cooperation, is dissolved in this lack of interest that is even stimulated by the way that most of us lives. So the ability to work and the stimulus on the potential of each one, on each one's gift, should be studied again by each one of us, because most of us human beings don't value the use of time and the use of work. if we can observe how most people think, we are always looking for an advantage, or how to optimize our time, not use our best in work, not collaborating actively, giving the best as possible. And all these codes enter through the subconscious, through this superficiality, that when we don't see an immediate benefit, we let things go, or on the contrary, only dedicate to that which brings us an immediate benefit. So you see how we, human beings ourselves, limit our expression, our whole potential. And here in this third parameter about how we are in the principle of community life, we could see and bring to ourselves during the day. Do I try to place my consciousness, my potential, my knowledge, the best thing I have, for the sake of my own expression first, but also trying to also benefit community life or social life? Or do I only satisfy myself, let us say, or I think that it is enough to only use my time and potential, my work and dedication, when it brings me some benefit, when I feel that I am assisted in that. And with this, minutes pass, hours pass, days pass, and one day, most of us will see ourselves in a greater process of accumulation of experience. It's called old age here. In my understanding, some very distorted connotation. So we mature and we think, but how have I made good use of the time of my life? So today I am 50, 70, 90 years old. What have I done of my time? And practically in most situations, we will do a conscious examination, and we examine and you see that we are on a boat of collective life that had a very superficial approach regarding the use of time and the appliance of our own potential for this group potential and social potential. So even though we are in a very abundant planet of a planet that has abundant resources, we see things lacking in a great process of inequality that goes much beyond, or better saying, has a root that goes much beyond a political, economical approach, that is this precariousness of the approach of time and our individual work. The fourth parameter is the parameter of where is something natural in human nature, which is our desire to help others. Do we have this alive yet? Not helping others in something that brings me some recompense or some result. It's simply a principle, a desire, a very normal, I could even say, a normal impulse to be available to help others. But now you see, without prejudices and without try to get some advantage from this help. You see, this value within us is something very difficult because, again, we are in a society that has developed this mechanism of exchange, and whom of us really dedicate themselves of selflessness, volunteer service. I mean the pure selflessness, something that doesn't think about any return, but just try to find a need, identify a requirement, and offer oneself to help very naturally. So this fourth parameter that we could have in our consciousness is if we still have within us in a genuine way, this feeling and desire to help. There are other peoples who some people who don't live in community but live in normal life but have this very much alive. So they are on the street, they go to a public transportation or go to some group activity place, and there by detecting some situation, they immediately and instinctively offer themselves to help. There are just a few people. It's not because others don't have this potential, but perhaps because most people have let themselves be accommodated and be anesthesia of this principle of offering some, of only offering themselves to collaborate when they have the possibility of retribution. But we can see cases on the street sometimes of some people who, when they observe a requirement or someone drops something or someone has some need and needs help, observe, oftentimes there are even hundreds of people together, someone manifests some type of need, and just a very few offer themselves to help. And today we begin to film, take pictures of that situation, but we don't take this initiative of assisting this. This is very important because we don't know if someday we will be on the other side, in need of some help, some assistance, some movement towards our own need. Eventually, there we will experience the other side of the coin. So this fourth parameter is this desire to help without prejudice and without looking for anything in return, because oftentimes this happens. We help more the filter of our prejudice. What is prejudice? Is an idea that we have about a situation or the appearance of someone. This is prejudice, some idea that we have that oftentimes impedes us of manifesting this desire of helping that is very genuine in this search for understanding of what community life and a principle of common good. The fifth, which is also really difficult in life nowadays, is that which we call renunciation, a healthy renunciation of a principle of personal property. So we are not here promoting any type of revolution of personal good. This is how our society has been established. We have no way to transgress this, proposing something that cannot even be experienced today in the society of today, generally. But that which we understand as property, from a pen to broader goods, something that we have, something that is under our care, to be an object, it could be a house in an environment of property, or an object for us to develop our human potential the most, and then give to a society or community life the best we have, and even share this good. And an acceptance of keeping this fruit, this best that we have, for the development of others. So with this fifth parameter, we can see how we human beings are very much distant of being able to find, or find again, better saying, a principle of community life in which, within the situation, we have our property, let us say, our goods, some material good is passing through our hands, and we potentiate the use of this good to the most, to be able in the situation to bear some fruit. And what fruit is this? The fruit of the development of our potential. And why is this fifth parameter is important? Because many have nothing or have almost nothing. So if we really consider ourselves to be part of a humanity, part of a human society, besides creeds, regions, the color of our skin, all of this, there are circumstances. We are within that which we can call, why not, a human project? By any chance, for some unknown reason, do we have these possessions of property? Could we renounce them internally? Renounce centralizing all of this and share this for the development of others. You see, this would break or breaks many paradigms, because we have been educated since early age to possess, to say, I, mine, and with this we create our personal world, a personal individual situation, and we don't even imagine, not even inside of our family, that we should use correctly that which I call mine, so that others that for some reason don't have access to all of this may have an opportunity of receiving this promptly also. So the fruit of the development of this, so that others may develop. Again, we know that this touches a paradigm that goes on the opposite direction of how the society is developed. And again, we are not promoting no revolution before the use of material goods. We are just reflecting on how our consciousnesses are before some parameters that could help us to collaborate so that society as a whole and human beings as a whole could have their opportunities. The sixth parameter that is the expulsion, or to expel fear from our consciousness, the fear that makes it difficult for us to interact with other human beings. And here we have to stop a little bit to value how we are before this. So a situation generates another. As we are very much stimulated into individual process, we end up creating a sort of life, a way of thinking that divests us from a possibility of facing, in the good sense, for having a parameter of how others think, how others act, how others feel, how others approach situations, others' temperament. So all of this that is individualism ends up encapsulating this social potential that all of us have, and that most children have this very naturally. A child, if a family goes to the park, the family arrives at the park, the first thing the child will do is to want to lose their hands from their parents and play with other children. Very naturally, very spontaneously, because this is in human nature to want to socialize, to coexist, to discover the expression of other human beings. So, time passes, society conditions us into individualism, and at a certain point we walk on a great avenue, a city like São Paulo, or any big city of any country, Barcelona, Portugal, in Portugal, whatever. If we observe in perspective, there we have hundreds of millions of people. You see, the Paulista Avenue at 9 a.m. on Monday, we have hundreds of people walking, each one on their own, in their own world, polarized in their objectives, their goals, their thoughts, their personal goals, totally abstracted of everything that is happening around, or only connecting when something brings some sort of interest to them. So imagine or observe this scene, and the scene of a child arriving at the park with their family and very happy to find many children to play and discover, sometimes just to play with a leaf, a branch, with the water, with the sun, to run. Run to where? Nowhere. Just run. To discover this principle of socialization that all of us have. And as we grow, we become this very strange being from a certain standpoint that does not manage to coexist, to socialize, to dialogue. Those who are a little bit more open to all of this could watch again a lecture that was done last year in Bahia, Salvador, in Brazil. There was a lecture about dialogue, our capacity of listening. This has much to do with this point of expelling fear, because we mature and we accumulate a series of fears that society itself places upon us, that is eventually a fear of dialoguing, of discovering that others are different of us. It doesn't mean to be an enemy, no, it's just different. And why not share? Why not offer my best and look the best within others, and then in this whole process gradually find this, that there, in a very mature point of human consciousness, we could call the common good. So, expelling fear it's a question that we should ask ourselves. Would we be decided to extirpate outside our consciousnesses this fear of living together, of being together, on different levels in community, be able to share and eventually learn how to listen, how to identify what others have in common with me, and also that which they don't have, because oftentimes that which is different of me is an aspect of common good that I have not discovered yet. It's just a different perspective. Why do we always have to be right and have the ideal perspective? So all of this sounds very obvious, but as we see in our society nowadays, impatience, non-acceptance, denial, all of this is creating 9 billion of individuals that are isolated, and this goes absolutely against the human logic. As I was saying before, a child naturally looks for socializing, being together, learning, sharing. They don't look for keeping for themselves. So we must have these parameters in mind very seriously for us to have some possibilities to revise this within our consciousnesses, that in those rings, it's an expression that I like, the rings where we interact and coexist, so that we can rescue these principles of community life, because there would be many solutions for nowadays, many situations that are not resolved or do not enter a line of solution, because each one is looking for their own solution for themselves and not turned to a principle of common good. So this was the sixth parameter, which is to expel fear. And the seventh and last parameter in this context is a possibility for us to demonstrate as human beings, awake human beings, that are relatively attentive, a vigilance before pattern of behavior that go against minimal patterns of healthy human beings and constructive human beings. So, when we are in group, when we are in society, are we attentive to this vigilance? Are we attentive and vigilant, watchful to a pattern that enters and goes against all this logic of a normal human pattern? Or are we so insensitive and dumb that when we see darkness, you see, we see darkness daily in many aspects, and it goes much beyond a principle of morality or pattern of behavior that is a stereotype. No, darkness in the sense of going against a luminous principle of lucidity that all human beings have. Every human being, when they see something absurd, they know that it's going against a minimum pattern of behavior. So how many of us are really watchful before that, are attentive, and when this happens, even if we cannot do anything externally, our consciousnesses place themselves there, watchful, so that this pattern of behavior may not absorb us. This is so important for us to have in mind, because you see, if we watch a movie or a TV series, whatever, in the sense, most of those codes, what do they incite within us? Remember everything that is available there to millions of people. Or what patterns stimulate us, and what type of reaction do we have before that pattern? So in a naive way, oftentimes we are watching a series or a movie, whatever, each one of us has contact with us. So those examples of patterns of behavior, violence, you see, nowadays society deals with a paradigm. Society itself stimulates that which later on it's going to try to resolve. Because where was born the pattern of behavior of domestic violence? Where does it come from? If we observe the series or soap operas, this pattern of behavior is stimulated, impunity is stimulated, betrayal is stimulated. Betrayal on many levels, right? Because oftentimes you associate betrayal with relationships, but how many of us do not betray our own values? Do you see? In all of this, that communication on many levels nowadays stimulates this whole pattern of behavior, and we don't realize it. So we should be watchful before this principle of darkness. This is very important. Otherwise, this enters our consciousnesses through the subconscious. It brings a code, the code of impunity, the code of domestic violence, the code of indifference, the code of I don't care. And without realizing, we become violent, we don't care for impunity, and we think that someone is to be blamed for this. So you see, these reflections are within a context for human beings who want to rescue their own dignity, including dignity, feeling worthy of considering ourselves human beings, someone who is sensitive to the matters of the world, someone who is sensitive to the coming generations. I used to say, what type of world do I want to leave for the coming generations? Or am I not interested about this? But I don't have children, I don't have grandchildren. Why do I have to think about this? You see, if you're thinking like this, you are going on the opposite direction of the human project. The human project has existed and exists for us to generate, create mature patterns, and at each generation, this is to say, every 10 years, we may, as humanity, offer for those who are coming behind us something that is more consistent with creation. So, coming back to the context, so to be watchful before these pattern of darkness. It's not darkness based on moral of a sectarian specific group or the moral of a country or culture. No, I'm referring to darkness, really real darkness, that which any human being is capable of identifying. But again, we are in a social moment that is so difficult. difficult. Why? Because communication is very fast, is very accessible, and those who are in the leadership, determination of these contents is a small group who are massively generating patterns of behavior which are leading us to self-destruction practically. We don't care. We don't connect that the fact of the natural disasters, floods, the difficulties of great urban centers is a fruit of our own consumption of some products that we don't know where the packages go to afterwards. Do you see how far impunity goes? And you say, oh, but I have nothing to do with the flood in that city, or the almost plastic island that exists in the Pacific Ocean, but I didn't throw anything in the Pacific Ocean. You see, all these patterns enter through this principle that we call darkness. They are there in the patterns of behavior that we ourselves eventually, who consider ourselves to be civilized, who participate in some degree, but we don't see the consequences of this. So we watch movies, soap operas, series, we are in contact with advertisements, and all of this bring codes to our subconscious. And one day we see ourselves asleep, dumb before this watchfulness. We no longer take care or filter what we are going to welcome as a pattern of behavior. So this seventh parameter is very important. And all the 7 parameters generate a sort of encapsulation of our consciousness. We are encapsulated, our consciousness becomes atrophied, and we don't even imagine a principle of common good, a principle of group life. So it's important to have these 7 parameters before us so that we can eventually resume this whole potential, which is the subject of community life. Well, this subject is very important because no human being has been created to live alone. Since that which we call the time of the caverns or the time of Stone Age, whatever way we want to understand the situation, human beings have always had the tendency of being in group, because by being in group, we also have this feeling of protection naturally and also complementarity. So we have to watch a principle that is very much stimulated today, based on that which I was mentioning at the beginning, which is the theme of survival, that is the excessive self-sufficiency. If we didn't live in society, we wouldn't survive, even if we had many material resources. Why? Because we depend on something someone who does something that is essential for us. Someone cultivates plants, harvests, and cooks, and someday I will go to the restaurant, I can have food. If we didn't have this chain, what use would be for us not to have money? So you see how we live in a society that is totally interdependent without realizing it. We only realize this when we lack something. One day we open the tap and there is no water. We go to the tank and there is no water, and we say, oh, what will I do now? So without meaning to, we have built a society or modus operandi in the world that has the dependency of one another, but without this perception of collaboration. We created a mechanism that we don't know how it works, so much so that in a big building, for example, we enter a building in Dubai that has 35 or 40 levels One day in the office, 340, I open the tap and there is no water. We don't know what to do. So, this community principle that should be rescued for us to reflect how we are nourishing an interdependency, but not a self-sustainability within this dependency. So again, if someone, one day again, they don't transport, there is no transportation for food, we don't know how to cultivate, and we don't know how to resolve the situation. So a principle of community life is a principle in which each one grants something to this group or the society in the possibility of valuing work mutually. So who really values the work of those who are on the field producing that which we are going to eat tomorrow? Do we give thanks? Do we remember that we have to eat? Do we remember that someone is taking care of the water? Do we remember that someone is striving to produce that food and someone is doing something so that this water may come to us? So here we have something to consider, that is, there is a pattern of behavior that has been very much sown within our subconsciousness, that is envy and jealousy. And you could say, do I have envy or am I jealousy? Our pride mind will say, no, I don't. But this snake, this poison is there. So much so that we have difficulty in helping others' development. Because society is very competitive, it is going on the opposite way of community life. So, thinking on the best effort to have that which is essential, why don't I collaborate when I don't see a benefit for myself? Why do I have to feel jealousy or enviness when someone is manifesting their best potential and even harvesting the fruits of this or collecting the fruits of this? Why is this reflection important? Although it's not one of the parameters in this context, why do we say this? Why for others and not for me? Have you seen yourself in this situation? Why is this happening for others and not for me? Where is this question coming from? Probably because I'm not considering the potential of that which is happening with me. So as I don't develop this potential, when within this community movement something happens to others, this disturbs me. So you see that oftentimes it's reverse of the interpretation that we see. This is important because this addiction of enviness and jealousy is very silent, very anonymous within our consciousnesses, but it leads us on the opposite direction of that which would be sharing or seeking common good. Seeking to see that if good comes through others, why can I accept? If someone is beautiful, why cannot admire that beauty? If someone expresses a potential in an activity, why cannot I enhance that potential? If something is developed through others, why can't I support that? For those who have felt enviness, it's a very corrosive energy because it practically puts me against others and places me in a situation of feeling inferior to others. You see how we have to resume as human beings a principle of community life that is healthier, cleaner and more collaborative, which should be more spontaneous in a normal human consciousness. as we don't develop our potential, we chase others, even blocking the development of others. So it's a very confusing situation, you see. So within this also, we will see something that is very rooted, that we find within us, that is inertia. So inertia is a material law, is something that belongs to human nature. Even if we don't want, we feel inertia. Because matter, even if we don't mean to, because matter tends to stop and stabilize. So we have to go against this law of inertia. And this law is also behind the subject of jealousy and enviness. As I don't want to strive, I don't want to develop my potential, I don't want to put energy for common good, this inertia ends up creating this situation, and together with everything else, comparison, enviness, jealousy, that has to do with our difficulty in putting our part in development for the common good, you see? So we are absent to offer ourselves to common good out of inertia or laziness, and we feel bad when someone disturbed when someone offers this to common good. We should investigate this a little bit, because oftentimes we have or would have solutions that are very close to us in small groups, families, social groups, or even regions, and out of inertia or enviness or competitiveness, we don't allow this chemistry to happen and the best of each one to converge into that certain situation, and there we see a solution. And we see this when we cannot call it ignorance in the sense of not having knowledge, because even if in the academical means, political environment, medical environment, we observe this principle. So, a principle of ignorance in this conception of limitation of the consciousness, we allow ourselves to not collaborate on some research or a solution, not collaborating on some strategy, due to a principle that is of competitiveness, because we don't see some personal benefit. You see, what I'm saying seems to be obvious, but investigate if each one of us don't have eventually the same attitudes within their community world that they experience, either family, the social community life where you live, in the circles where you make decisions and participate. This is there. And if we are not attentive to this, that which is so beautiful and broad, or would be natural within all of us, which is the common good, cannot emerge. You see, animals have this. Animals, when they live in group, in different expressions, they oftentimes try to protect the weakest ones and work looking for food for the weakest, looking for this principle of good that for animals would be the group. You see that oftentimes neighboring countries are in conflict. What is the reason for that? Where are we going to get as human beings, nourishing this whole situation that goes against group life and common good? And we cannot say that the war is in Ukraine. This war begins within each one of us. When we don't make these reflections and reflect if we don't have to revise a little bit how we are before that which we should contribute with, to contribute to these rings of interaction that all of us have, that we call community life, and there promote that which we call common good in some way. Well, this is the reflection for today. We have foreseen another theme that is called living ethics, that will mention this or talk about the same thing, considering that those who are going to listen to it are looking for a genuine human pattern of behavior. For us to look for this being worthy human beings and not this pattern of behavior that is around, that many of us have very rooted within, that is leading us to self-destruction of society. Although apparently, again, we are a technological society. So we have to make these reflections to collaborate on our awakening and in the resuming of this human project that exists. So I would like to know if there is any question in the chat about the subject, those who are accompanying us on the YouTube transmission. If there is no question on the chat, if anyone here has a question. We have a question from Silvia Martinez on the chat. She says, "Good evening, Friar. Does indifference lead to inertia?" Or in the second question, is fear an illusion? Inertia, as I was saying, it is part of human nature, both physical, material, as well as emotional. So much so that we have attachments, don't we? This is the expression of an emotional inertia, which is a difficulty to expand that which we call feelings until we touch higher feelings, and mental inertia, which are our crystallizations, our prejudice, and our ideas that have stopped in time. So inertia is one thing and indifference is something else. Of course, eventually indifference could be the result of nourishing inertia. However, indifference is a state of consciousness. It's not a law, let us say, that rules or conditions our physical matter, our emotional matter, and our mental matter. So indifference could be the result of situations that have a more profound indifference that the way society works as a whole generates in us. This is to say, that which does not bring a benefit to me, that which I cannot buy, that which is not aligned to my expectations or feels me in some way, I'm not interested about. So this sensibility, natural sensibility that all of us have, ends up in this indifference. And fear, if fear is an illusion, you see, in the West, the word illusion has been very much misused. And we should have very careful when you use this word. Something that could be illusion for me is still reality for someone else. I should not transgress that which is real for others, just because for me it's an illusion. Illusion in what context? Real in what context? That which passed through my experience used to be real, and now it's no longer part of my learning experience. So the word illusion is really a very delicate word to apply in this context connected to fear. Fear from a certain standpoint. You could watch a lecture made about fear, recorded in Oklahoma, in which we studied 12 years. We chose 12 years about this for this lecture, and they could be useful for your reflection. Now, fear can also be a creation, a mental and emotional creation from a previous record or trauma or memory that generates a sort of blockage of the consciousness that causes this feeling or sensation of thought of fear. So, if on your level you look for something real, something that really exists, what is that something that really exists? Something that you interact with and you realize that in this interaction some type of stimulus is promoted. Generally, fear is like a ghost. If you want to get fear, understand fear, it's a ghost. You get it and you cannot get it, grab it. It's a creation that has even conditioned our nervous system. Psychiatry knows this today. We have generated an addiction cycle of behavior, and from that triggering point, we begin to feel that nothing is happening. It has generated a addiction cycle that triggers a reaction that will generate a behavior. So I'm not saying that fear is illusion, it's an artificial creation from all of this that has been created. It's a complex question, but I believe it has been answered. A question from Mount Shasta. Prior, how to deal with inertia or even neutralize this situation when it happens to us. You should not leave it for later. You see, Charlie Chaplin was a comedian. They say he was a comedian, but in this ludic way he had of being, he used to say, careful when we say tomorrow. Tomorrow I will do it, so that this tomorrow will not become never again. So if you want to begin working on inertia, try observing precisely at this moment what you know you should be doing today, for example, when we finalize the lecture, what you should do, and something within you says tomorrow or the day after. Tomorrow when you look at this, you say again. And one day when you see this has stopped moving, it has become a nucleus of inertia. On terms of attitudes, objects, personal hygiene, and many expressions of our lives, we will find the situation that I will do it later. And with this, minutes pass, days pass, hours pass, weeks, months pass, years pass. And you see an interesting situation to give as an example. There is someone in Brazil called Amir Klink, and he went to Antarctica.
Antes de viajar, visitar a família. Não, agora eu lembrei, em Paraty, no Rio de Janeiro. Ele foi lá onde
So he's a seaman,
e depois foi fazer toda aquela viagem, não
and
sozinho pela Antártida.
he went to visit his family, and then he went to a trip alone through Antarctica. And he went back home, and he found the same window that he told himself he was going to fix someday. And when he arrived, he saw the window, and he realized that as he left for later, months passed, but that window was broken a long time ago. And he realized how our mechanism of always living for later is. So regardless of our temperament, it helps very much for us to try each day to do a little bit more than that which inertia allows us. So the day has ended, apparently, and there we look around with our commitment and responsibility, and we observe if we can't do a little bit of greater effort, something that our inertia would tend to impede us of doing. And this exercise is important, and it's a little exercise. But the size of what we are going to do, or the repercussion, the result of what we are going to do, is not the important thing, but the movement of coming out of inertia. Do you see? So that clothes that we took from the line and we put there, and the day ends and we look at that clothes and we know perfectly that it wouldn't be ideal to leave those clothes there. So we break the inertia. It's a matter of minutes. It's not hours folding our clothes. No, we fold our clothes and we put in the wardrobe, and that alignment of not allowing inertia to defeat us is going to impede us to be paralyzed when we are supposed to take a step. So you see, it's a small exercise. You observe what is still pending, and I know that I could still do a movement. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 seconds, it doesn't matter. It's just a movement of not allowing us to paralyze, because we get used to always living for later. One day we will repent, and we won't have the strength of doing, and we will see clearly that we have been defeated by inertia. Another question from Cohen: by wanting to have an immediate result and you don't have it, could this lead you not to create expectation, or are they different things? How does the consciousness express itself in this? Every action is based in an expectation. When we cut the wood, we reach a final product that is furniture. Something else is to have interest about the furniture, so we have to be very careful with our words, not to be confused with that which we are building today, with the reflection about common good and group life. So, my expectation before something group life is my expectation of giving my best. It's not a product, do you see? It's a movement of gathering my best and offering my best for common good and the good of others. Life in society of offering my behavior as human beings minimally polite and thinking about the good of others. Something else is not having any interest in manifesting my best just because I won't have anything of concrete in return. They are two things that walk together, but they are different things. So the most important is in this reflection is for us to give our best without any expectation for results. This is to say, without expecting recognition or compliments. You see, this is something that gets our more teenager human aspect. If we are not complimented because we are polite, we stop being polite. You see how childish this is. So in common group life, I express myself in the best way possible, almost for a duty, a human dignity. I need it. It's an intimate need of me, of myself, to manifest my best for others. So the theme of interest should be very much measured by each person, so that we may not stop doing that which we know we are supposed to do just because we have lack interest because we see there is no result for his recognition or expectation. You see, other kingdoms of nature, if a rose would stop being a rose just because no one is going to see it in the rose tree, isn't it ridiculous? Or a field flower not exhalating all its perfume, that accumulation of solar energy. You see, the oils are accumulated, flowers accumulate oil. Flowers have all those aromas, accumulation of solar energy. If we imagine if nature would depend on something to have this beauty, calendula having such a beautiful golden color, if no one complements it. And we are not interested because we condition what we offer to community as a whole, human community, human good, human values as a whole. Think about this. A question from Mikael and Gran. Is there anything the Friar would like to say about these principles of community life in relation to the specific energy of Mount Shasta where a nucleus is being established? Where it's a very specific question from a specific group that at this moment is gathered in California, in Mount Shasta. You see, each nation has a commitment before the world, and they have this commitment because for different reasons they have a location and a natural condition and a type of human being that is there to develop this potential to the most and collaborate in that which we can call a common good on the world level. Here I open a parenthesis. We are not speaking about any global narrative. It's just a principle of common good. It's our seeing ourselves as human beings with the potential of mutual collaboration, both on the individual level, also group, and also regional and national. Why not? And the United States have a great potential. They are a nation that have received many gifts, a certain diversity to be able to collaborate with others, both on this historical, chronological level, and also on the potential of human resources. So this nation, and therefore this nucleus mentioned in the question to be founded in California, will have this potential to develop a principle of community life, not only to assist local and regional situation, very much connected with the theme of original indigenous consciousness, but also a potential of a thought turned to the fact that everyone can resume the development of a potential in function of common good, for the common good. Something different to that which the nation has developed so far for their own development. The nation has achieved this in some degree, given the due proportions and the environments where there is a lot of inequality. So to synthesize, the potential as a whole of the nation should also be there, given the due proportions, to serve, to offer the potential that the American soul has of elevating this potential to the highest point, so that other environments inside of the nation and also on the regional level and Central America can also be benefited. It's an answer for the general public. As it is a public lecture, we won't enter in details because it's a specific question for a group that is working in this specific region. Last question in the chat. Friar, what would you recommend for people who want to have the experience of community life? How would this process take place and how to begin it? There is a principle that is, if you want to live in community, learn how to live alone. This learn how to live alone is not to learn how to live in this selfish way. Is to learn to rediscover yourself, to observe yourself, so that by interacting with community life, you may not carry your gaps, your precariousnesses, your lacks to within community life. This is just an introduction to the answer. So first of all, observe how you are with yourself and how you consider to be yourself a human being on the way to become more mature. And if we are in community, we are there to help one another, to complement one another, to develop this potential, and then share all the fruits of all of this, which is very rare and very difficult. But of course, there are communities on many levels. There are many social nuclei, many associations. It depends on your aspiration, on which community group you aspire to live with. In the work that I represent, which is Fraternity, International Humanitarian Federation, we have some communities, a principle of community life, and also some nuclei where we try to practice in a stable way, and also with people who stay for limited time. If you have some interest, you can go to the webpage fraternidadehumanitaria.org, and then you will find more information, further information. In the world, there are many levels, many offers, different offers of community life. I would just recommend you to be careful where you're going to place your consciousness, because oftentimes they are the multiplication or accumulation of that which we have not resolved and which we have also studied today. This is to say, many communities have been created to live so for others to work for you. This is not what the work tries to develop. So this is why we have to have much discernment for you to see what is your aspiration for a community life, not to go end up in a community where there is much inertia, but that it may be something proactive. By approaching to community life, you should collaborate to develop the potential to all, and not only be enjoying what exists in this situation that is relatively anchored and developed. Very well. So today it's already tomorrow. In Brazil it's already Monday here. A good end of Sunday in the United States. I hope I have collaborated with the cycle of impulses of public lectures. Continue following the schedule both on my webpage, freiluciano.perguntas, as well as on the Irdin Publishers channel on YouTube. When we have the schedule for February, we are going to publish it, and we will let you know, and we will continue to interact both through the lectures and the chat, as well as live when we can be together. Thank you for those who are present here physically, and also those on the YouTube channel. And we see you next time. Good night and good afternoon for those who are in the United States. Thank you.